So, someone asked me about how to study. So, I'm going to show you multiple ways. All of these are useful, in my opinion, and valid. And in a perfect world, you probably do all of them. Perhaps not all of them for the whole chapter or for every chapter, but you're going to use all of them at different points, perhaps. The first thing you need to do is you need to actually read the chapter when it's assigned. Now, I'm assuming you do that. But when we're reading informational text, we need to think about the informational text. When you're reading something you enjoy, like Harry Potter, then you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this scrape? What is Hagrid hiding? Where did he get a dragon egg? You're thinking all of these things. Even if you're not actively, consciously thinking them, your mind is curious. And so you think about those things, and then you get to that part, and you're like, oh, that's where he got the dragon egg. All right? Informational text, you may be less interested in. So sometimes we have to make ourselves think about it. And some people like myself, this is a absolutely confirmed fact about Mr. Furlow. I am perfectly capable of reading an entire page in a book, getting to the bottom of the page and realizing I had no idea what I just read. I read every single word, but my brain did not take in the information. So sometimes we have to force ourselves to think about what we're reading. Now, one way I have mentioned before, and I'm going to show you now, is we have our textbook over here, and we have a blank Google Doc. Now, in the old days, I would have a paper textbook, and I'd have my paper notebook, all right? We're not in the old days anymore. You've got a digital textbook, you're going to have digital notes that you're making. So what I personally would do is I would take these objectives, because remember, those are your mission objectives. At the end of reading 5.1, you should know the answers to those objectives. So I'm going to copy and paste those, and I'm going to just pop them right over here. Now, and because I don't really love bullets, I prefer numbered lists, so I'm going to change that to numbers, specifically that one. Now you do you don't have to have bullets. And I'm going to just throw in a bullet in between, or indented list here. All right. Now, I know at the end of reading this, I should know how to contrast cell division in prokaryotes and eukaryotes, identify the phases of the eukaryotic cell cycle, explain how the cell cycle is controlled, and define cancer and relate it to the cell cycle. All right. I also need to know these vocabulary. And we're probably going to include that vocabulary in the notes we take as we read. However, I'm not specifically going to worry about those in this study technique. All right. Now, I am going to skip to the end here. Let's see here. And let's see here. So, and, well, this is a short thing. So here we have cell division and cell division in prokaryotes. That's going to go with that, right? And then we have cell cycle or cell division in eukaryotes. So that's going to go with number 1. We have the cell cycle. So that's probably going to go with number 2. The eukaryotic cell cycle, that's going to be part of number 2. Control of the cell cycle. So as soon as we see that, we know we're talking about number 3. All right? So I'm going to pretend I've already read and I've already done number 1 and 2, and I'm going to skip here. In the cell cycle, now I read out loud to myself. That's just how my brain processes it better. So I'm not trying to read to you per se, I'm reading to myself. I just happen to be recording myself. If the cell cycle occurred without regulation, cells might go from one phase to the next before they were ready. What controls the cell cycle? Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out, isn't it? How does the cell cycle know when to grow, synthesize DNA, and divide? The cell cycle is controlled mainly by regulatory proteins. There's those proteins again. These proteins control the cycle by signaling the cell to either start or delay the next phase of the cycle. They ensure that the cell completes the previous phase before moving on. Regulatory proteins control the cell cycle at key checkpoints, which are shown in the figure below. There are a number of main checkpoints. All right, pause. Just finished paragraph. So now I need to think about what parts of that paragraph to put in my objective list. All right. So it said, so they're here, they're asking questions. That doesn't help me. Cell cycle is controlled by regulatory proteins. Boom. Cell cycle is controlled by regular proteins. All right. These proteins control the cycle by signaling either the start or delay the next phase of the cycle. Okay, so then I might add to this, they signal the start or delay of the next step. All right. And proteins control the cycle. They ensure that the cell completes the previous stage before moving on. Regulatory proteins control at key checkpoints. There are a number of key. All right. Now, notice by doing this, I have a specific question I'm trying to answer. Objective number 3. I am looking at one paragraph. I'm not looking at the whole chapter. I'm not looking at the whole lesson. I'm looking at one paragraph and trying to get the information out of that one paragraph. All right? We look at the figure. Always look at the diagrams in a textbook. Checkpoints in the eukaryotic cell cycle ensure that the cell is ready to proceed before it moves on to the next phase of the cycle. All right? Cell cycle ensures that the cell is ready to proceed before it moves on to the next phase of the cycle. All right? We kind of already have that, so I don't think we need to repeat it. Now, we could, all right, the G1 checkpoint just before the S phase makes the key decisions of whether the cell should divide. These phases, the G phase, S phase, G phase, metaphase, all those things, that would have been up here in number 2, but we skipped that to make the video shorter. So I'm not going to put that in here. I am, however, going to come down here and under checkpoints. Now I indent because when you indent, that means it's part of the previous statement. So I is part of B. A and B are both part of 3. Okay, so there's the G1 checkpoint, and it makes the decision of whether the cell should divide. Should the cell divide? All right, and then we go to Roman numeral 2, and we're going to have the S checkpoint, and it determines if the DNA has been replicated. Is the replicated DNA correct? Notice how I'm putting it kind of in my own words. So, because if I can put it in my own words, I understand it. At least in the literal verbiage, I understand. And then lastly, we have the mitotic spindle checkpoint. All right. Occurs at the point in metaphase where all the chromosomes should have aligned at the mitotic plate. Okay. So, in metaphase, when chromosomes align. All right. Now, the next thing we have here is cancer and the cell cycle. All right. Well, number 4, define cancer and relate it to the cell cycle. All right. So we're done with number 3. Maybe we might find something to put back there, but I think we're done. All right. Cancer and the cell cycle. Cancer is a disease that occurs when the cell cycle is no longer regulated. Well, that seems like a pretty clear definition to me. Cancer occurs when the cell cycle is no longer regulated. This may happen because the cell's DNA becomes damaged. Damage can occur due to exposure to hazards such as radiation or toxic chemicals. Cancerous cells generally divide much faster than normal cells. They may form a mass of abnormal cells called a tumor. The rapidly dividing cells take up nutrients and space that normal cells need. This can damage tissues and organs and eventually lead to death. All right, now I've read the paragraph. Now I need to go back and see what else I need to put under number 4. All right, so this may happen because the cell's DNA becomes damaged. So I'm going to go over to my Google Doc and I'm going to say caused by damage to cell's DNA. All right, damage can occur due to exposure to hazards such as radiation or toxic chemicals. All right, so I'm indenting again because this is part of B. Damage may be caused by chemicals. Cancer cells generally divide much faster. They may form a mass of abnormal cells called a tumor, and rapidly dividing cells take up nutrients. So, all right, now I'm going to go back because this is a new subtopic. So cancer cells reproduce rapidly and use up resources like nutrients. Cancer cells may form a mass or tumor. All right, and that's it. So again, we're pretending we did 1 and 2, but that's 3 and 4. All right, so you're reading and then you're actively going back and deciding what information is important, and you're doing it like paragraph by paragraph. And yes, this may be annoying, and yes, it's going to take longer. That's what you got to do. All right, I mean, if you're going to go to college, you're going to have to read, you're going to have to know how to study. This is one way to actively read and study as you're reading. And then once you're done, you can go back and study this information even if you don't have the textbook. And when Mr. Furlow says, hey, do the lesson object or lesson review questions, you've now got a summary of the entire lesson that you can refer back to. And if you don't see the answer, then you can pull it up in the textbook. All right. Also, I'm willing to bet you that if you go to do the lesson reviews, you're going to have a better understanding of what's in the lesson just because you've done this part. Okay? So it's worth giving it a shot. Okay? All right. So I'm going to stop for this video, and then the next video I'm going to show you what to do with vocabulary.